of drivers, essentially technology-related, that really have forced the change in the industry. You see some of those drivers that you have known in the industry, like the fact that customers want today to have another experience. Customers nowadays are much more tempted to look first at the way that the service will be delivered than actually looking at the real value of the service itself. So the customer's experience is really very much important. Also, what you see in our industry, in the financial industry, you see many more new entrants. You see many companies that you had actually heard the name of over the last, not even the last 2 years, that are now getting into the industry and really actually promoting change, making sure that technologies are really used for the best way. Open banking is perhaps something that you may not have yet in Rwanda, but let me tell you, in Europe, there is actually even a regulation that we call PSD2 that is forcing all the banks to open up the systems to any third-party providers as well. That is leading to new business model. I do believe that the old traditional business model upon which banks have been actually working upon, certainly for the last 2 or 3 centuries, is now over. Banks will have actually to reinvent themselves in creating new ways of generating revenue and business in the future. And of course, whilst all of that is developing, you still have actually pressure on regulations, compliance. That is there. We said it actually for many years now. That is there to stay for now many years. Risk management, of course. Since the big financial crisis of 2008, there's a huge focus to making sure that whatever business the financial industry is developing is really respecting all the key criteria of risk management. And then finally, cyber. Cyber is there, has been always there, actually, certainly, but clearly, with the fact that the industry is clearly opening up, the fact that the world is now becoming clearly interconnected, cyber is there, and it's likely to stay. Now, if you look at all these drivers, you would agree that behind them, there is a single common denominator, and that is this one. All of that is happening nowadays. Why? Because actually technology is permitting this. Technology is evolving so fast nowadays that everything is becoming possible. And actually, all those change, I'm pretty sure, I'm looking at this from the African point of view, I'm looking at this from the European point of view, I'm looking also at this from the Asian point of view where I'm living, and you see that there, clearly, the pace of change is likely to be even more exponential in the future. You've heard, I'm sure, about the law of Moore. I'm not sure that this law, moving forward, will stay relevant, so that the technology is evolving even faster than that. Then, of course, as I said, that is leading to increased demand from the clients. Clients want to have another experience. They want actually to have other types of services also from the banks. They want to have other ways to their service being delivered to them as well through open banking, through other types of systems, and through the internet. And then, of course, that is, as I said, facilitating the entrance of new players. All sorts of companies, and I know that we are sitting in Africa, but in the place where I'm living, in Asia, you've heard about experience like Alipay or Tencent, WeChat. These guys have entered into the industry only a few years ago. And when it comes to China, have managed in a few years to completely remove the traditional bankers of the market by really providing the right customer's experience, the right systems for the people who want actually to have banking services at the fingertip. Not even talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is actually being used more and more into the industry, and I'm sure also that you have read some articles or watched documentaries about how much the usage of artificial intelligence is growing in the financial industry, also posing there a lot of opportunities, but at the same time also a lot of a challenge moving forward. And then finally, I mentioned already cybercrime. Know that the world through internet is completely interconnected. You can actually dialogue with anyone in the planet. You need at the same time to be sure that you have the right level of protections against what I would call the bad guys, the cyber criminals, the ones that are actually using this increasingly interconnected world to actually abusing the systems and penetrate to all your systems. Now, these are the challenges that we are all facing as a community. This is about all of us here. This is about actually the 11,000 financial institutions that SWIFT is connecting to a single network. And obviously, it is your challenges, but it is also our challenge as a company and all our challenge as far as the community is concerned. As you know, SWIFT is clearly a community. So when you look at that community, when I'm looking at all of you, and we've been running many studies, many surveys, in trying to really figure out what you need from your community. I'm really focusing here on that word, the community, right? And basically, you're looking at three things. How can we all together help to reduce the cost of the industry? This is one thing. We're also looking at new things. How can we all together define new ways of doing business? How can we eventually, by working together, help each other's business to grow? Then also, coming back to the notion of risk, how can we work together to mitigating the risk of the industry overall? And then finally, how can we work together in making sure that moving forward, the industry is a lot more secure than it was yesterday, and it is still today. And that's what actually helped the industry reducing its cost. First of all, the reach that we have. We are, as I said, connected to about 11,500, depending actually the day we count it, but 11,000 institutions being connected. We actually carry transactions to about 200 countries in the world. We have, major system, major platform, more than 7 billion transactions per year. All currencies, this is highly resilient, highly secure. And actually the cost of those transactions went down from about €1, about 25 years ago, now to about a few euro cents, or sometimes even actually 0.10 cent per transaction. That is what I call economies of scales, working all together to actually providing the benefits to all of us together. And of course, when it comes to Africa, this is even more meaningful to you. You see the number of stock exchanges that we have now connected to in the same network, the regional payment systems that are also connected, the high-value payments clearing systems, RTGS, 22. You look also at the countries that we have now connected in this part of the world to our network. And then finally, you see also the number of banks. All of that, again, is bringing, I believe, when it comes to developing the intra-business of Africa, this is providing you actually with the right mean for economies of scale moving forward. This actually, so this is the numbers that we have for Africa. You see that it was last year, no, it's still this year, actually, 417 million transactions being exchanged. We passed the bar in Africa of more than 1 million transactions being processed in a day. And you see the growth rate that we have, nearly 17% growth rate. This is actually amazing, and certainly one of the highest numbers that we've seen in this part of the world for a long time. And that is perhaps even more impressive. That is actually showing you how much actually the community is benefiting from the economies of scales. Moving in 16 years, reducing the cost by 92% per transactions, but at the same time, volumes going up by a factor of 16. That is, again, the economies of scale that a community that we are all representing here today actually is capable to deliver. Now, moving on to, which is a new chapter somewhere. Also, how can we work together in developing new ways of doing business? How can we work together as a community to actually creating new business line? And perhaps the best example of this is the new service that SWIFT, the community, has launched about sort of 18 months ago now, that is called the GPI service, Global Payment Initiatives. You've seen in one of my slides that we claim that every single transactions over the SWIFT network goes actually to, or is getting to the final recipient in about 3 or 4 seconds. This is actually what technology permits to make. At the same time, around this, you have all sort of controls, regulatory requirements, and all that, that makes those transactions a lot slower. So much so that sometimes, still today, our world, our community is being perceived as very slow and not innovative. And that's why, altogether, we came with new service and to say, well, there are ways in which, in working together, that we can actually work on speed. We can work on transparency. We can work in traceability. We can work on certainty and adding more information in those payments. And that is what GPI is all about. And GPI, has it been launched, actually, as attracting a huge success. We have more than 150 banks in the world now actually having signed with this. More than 50 of them actually having implemented surveys with more than $1 billion US being carried every day through actually GPI-related transactions. You see some of those numbers there as well. Important to notice also is that all those transactions that you see into the system, 50% of those actually are being delivered to the final recipient, wherever it is, in less than 30 minutes. And actually, I think 25 or so of those transactions are being delivered in a few seconds, in a few minutes. That is proving that as a community working all together, we can crack this. We can make this a lot more efficient, and we can bring the right level of information at the right time to the final recipients. You see here, actually, all the banks in Africa that have engaged with the service. Many banks already are in there, some are actually implementing, some are already live. We're very proud to see those names in there, and we're looking forward to have many more in the future, because I really believe this is one of the ways to make a country like this one, Rwanda, or many other countries in Africa, much more open to the rest of the world moving forward, and definitely supporting the emergence of more trades in the country, within the continent, and between the continent and the rest of the world as well. Mitigating human risk. As I said earlier, since the 2008 financial crisis, we're living in a new environment, made of a lot more regulations, a lot more pressure from regulators, governments, authorities, and I do believe for the right reasons. Nobody wants to see anymore what happened in those days. At the same time, we all recognize that being compliant, making sure that we fulfill all the rules and all that is taking a lot of time, right? It's actually using a lot of energy, a lot of people working on that to making sure that we can do this. And you see some of those numbers here where that says that in some banks, between 15 and 20% of all the costs of running costs are actually dedicated to managing these aspects of those operations. And sometimes between 10 and 15% of all the workforce actually are related to financial crime compliance. So we do believe that as this world is really becoming a lot more complex, requires a lot more transparency than in the past, looking for quality assurance and all that, the best way to respond to all of this is, again, working as a community like we do here. And when we talk about community like this, we talk about utilities. And Swift, in that matter, with all of you, has developed over the last few years a certain number of products and services that you can actually consider as utilities that can be used by anyone, and that can really help you to facilitate your compliance to all these different regulations and rules that you have wherever you're operating, and really acting as this actually as a utility. Therefore, by having more players, more actors, we can help again there to everyone to reduce the cost to being compliant moving forward. Now, finally, and perhaps most importantly, cyber. Ultimately, in this room, I see bankers. And perhaps the most important foundation of banking is trust. That is actually what makes the banking world working, right? If you don't have that trust anymore, okay, there is no banking industry any longer, right? These guys, what I said again, the bad guys, the cyber criminals, are trying to undermine this, right? They're using actually the loops and holes they can have and all that, benefiting from the increasingly interconnected world to actually penetrate your systems and actually steal the money of anyone. So since 2 years, Swift has taken actually another level there. You may recall the case of the Central Bank of Bangladesh. Since that one, we've had a few other cases, and we really believe that the only way we can actually tackle this is, again, working as a community. That was the only way we could do this, right? And we've been working with all of you to creating this program that we call the CSP program, the Customer Security Program. That is looking at three things. That is looking at you as bankers with your own platform. How can we work together to making sure that they cannot be breached anymore? Very much important. We're looking also at your counterparties. As you do business with all the counterparties that you have, how can you make sure that those counterparties are safe enough from a cyber security point of view? That is also another angle that is very much important. And then finally, we're looking at the community. How can we share information amongst each other? We'll keep having attacks, let me tell you. We'll keep having attacks. But we can learn all together a lot actually by understanding what exactly happened during those attacks, so we can actually take the preventive actions in making those attacks impossible in the future. So this is really an important part of our job today, is making sure that this actually that is being implemented as quickly as possible. Part of that was the self-attestation process that I'm sure that many of you have been part of over the last sort of 14 months. I'm glad to actually say that at the end of last year, and frankly, to my surprise, we have reached a 89% self-attestation rate. That means that about more than 10,000 institutions have actually fulfilled their duty in making this possible. And I'm glad to say also, and very proud to say, that in Africa, 84% of all the banks we have actually on our network have done this as well. That is also proving one thing, a very good sign that cybersecurity is really also becoming part of your top priorities, making sure that all systems, banking system, but also many other systems in many other industries, are much safer moving forward. So I'm very glad to see that this is happening in this part of the world as well. So voila, so I'm really getting to the end of my talks. As Cedar said, this is your conference. I've very much insisted on the word community, because after all, SWIFT is made by you. It's made by the banks. It's made by any institutions that is being connected to our network. So this forum, this conference, is your forum. Make it actually rich. Please make sure that you connect to anyone. We have more than 500 people, and I can see you all there. Actually, let me tell you, from stage, it's very much impressive. So make sure you can actually take much more out of this conference that you have done in the past. It's really your conference, so I wish you actually an amazing conference. We're going to be here the next 3 days all together. I'm actually looking forward to engaging with you as well, to have as many communication discussions as possible, and also take profit of being together. This is an amazing family. SWIFT is an amazing family. Working all together is just the best benefit we can have